What's up, ladies and gentlemen? So today is June 20th, which is West Virginia Day, and to celebrate, I thought I would go back and watch one of the first videos I ever did on West Virginia history back in 2018 when I talked about how West Virginia became a state. So I'm going to be watching it, reacting to it, seeing how just the quality of my videos has changed over time. So let's get right into it. In celebration of West Virginia's 155th birthday, and to continue preparing people for Fallout 76, I thought I'd tell you one of my favorite stories about West Virginia. How West Virginia became a state. Okay, let's stop it right there. So immediately, this was still back when I was planning on covering a lot of Fallout 76 stuff. A lot has changed since then. The curtains are the same, but like the weather station has changed. Power strip is no longer there. I used to get comments about how close that power strip was, how much was attached to it, and like it being right above my couch. So if you go all the way back to the 18th century, it was originally proposed that parts of West Virginia were supposed to be a colony named Vandalia, but that never happened. Instead, we kind of got involved in the French and Indian War, then the Revolutionary War, and then the War of 1812. Okay, let's stop it right there. So there was supposed to be an additional colony that would make up parts of West Virginia. That is true, but what I have found out since then in my researching is before the Mason-Dixon line was finalized, the official border in between what would be Pennsylvania, Virginia, and really Maryland, before that border was finalized, this other colony was going to be predominantly everything below the Ohio and Monongahela River in Pennsylvania and really down through. So it would probably have just been really the entirety of the northern panhandle and large chunks of north central West Virginia. It wouldn't have been the entirety of what we think of now as West Virginia. But so the representatives decided that there would be a vote on May 23rd to decide whether or not Virginia was going to stay or leave the federal union. So what were the Western representatives going to do? They were loyal to the federal government. Were they just going to let the state of Virginia leave and take them with them? Nope. They decided to hold their own conference in Wheeling in May 1861. Okay, so prior to the Wheeling Convention, there was one smaller, kind of lesser-known convention known as the Clarksburg Convention. Basically, a lot of these Western County representatives met in the town of a guy named Carlisle. Carlisle was kind of a jerk. He really wanted this western part of Virginia to be basically just a slightly more industrialized version of Virginia. Now, the Clarksburg Convention fell apart very quickly because they didn't like the idea of trying to do this thing in essentially General Stonewall Jackson's backyard. Yeah, keep using that plane, Virginia. That works out. Very first thing they did with this reorganization clause was they appointed Francis Pierpont as the acting executive governor of Virginia. Okay, so this is a point that a lot of people like to argue with me in several of the videos I've made over the years. I will often describe Francis Pierpont as being the governor of Loyalist Virginia, and technically he wasn't the governor, he was the executive head of the Loyalist government of Virginia, which, if you really want to get into semantics, isn't a governorship. The large majority of people that watch my videos are males over the age of 45 that have been researching this stuff their entire life. They're like, no, there's a difference between the executive head of a loyalist state and the governor of a state. And I'm like, I don't know what that is, but sure, why not? Immediately turned around and requested additional military funding from the federal government. This led Lincoln to go before Congress and say that the Loyalist government of Virginia had to be recognized as the government of Virginia. So yeah, early on, the new state of, well, the not state, the Loyalist Virginia needed money. They were basically trying to form a government. They were trying to run a state that wasn't a state. And so, yeah, they needed a lot of federal support. They needed a lot of federal money. One of my favorite stories to come out of this whole time period was at one point when Virginia first separated, they needed money, they needed funds. So they started pulling money from various public works projects. They would basically roll into towns and say, hey, remember that bridge we promised you? You're not going to get it till after the war, and we're going to need all the money we gave you to build that bridge so that we can fight in this war. One of the buildings that were under construction at the time was the Weston State Hospital, or Trains-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum in Weston, West Virginia. There was an individual, I believe his name was John List, that with some of his friends in the United States military actually went to the bank where all this money was being held and proceeded to make a official withdrawal on behalf of the Loyalist state of Virginia. This is how they went about debating the name of the state. Mr. Van Winkle, I move to fill in the blank by inserting Allegheny. Mr. Hammond, I move to amend by making it Columbia. Columbia. So the naming of West Virginia debate was a major factor in the Wheeling conventions. Really, it probably went on for way too long than it should have, but a lot of these people really wanted the state to be named something that would separate it from Virginia, while other people were kind of fine with Virginia. I think there was even one guy that was just like, Virginia's the one that separated. We're still Virginians. They can come up with another name when they rejoin the United States, which everyone was like, okay, that's crazy. We're not doing that. Lincoln passes an enabling act that recognizes them as a government, but refuses to grant statehood until they add an amendment to their state constitution that would abolish slavery within the borders of this new state. Okay, so this amendment that had to be added to the West Virginia state constitution to abolish slavery. Yes, they had spent all this time constructing the state constitution, but they had never added anything to it pertaining to the abolishment of slavery. This is a super weird chapter to get into. Long story short, they added something to it known as the Wiley Amendment. Wiley was a guy, close friend of Francis Pierpont from north central West Virginia. And if you look at the statue, there is a statue of Francis Pierpont outside of the old Custom House, better known as Wheeling Independence Hall. And in that statue's hand, he is holding a document that is actually meant to represent the Wiley Amendment, essentially the document that would allow for West Virginia statehood, really the last threshold this government had to go through in order to receive federal recognition as its own state. June 20th, 1863, West Virginia becomes the 35th state admitted to the Union, and a representative from Tyler County named Borman becomes the first elected governor. So again, Francis Pierpont was never governor of West Virginia, but the first person appointed governor was a guy named Arthur Borman. He was from Tyler County. In Parkersburg, there is Fort Borman Park. That was actually a fortification constructed to oversee the B&O Railroad and the Ohio River. I've been there. It's a really interesting place, and it's named after this first governor of West Virginia. Stay wild, stay wonderful. Welcome to West Virginia. So yeah, that was the first video I ever made on how West Virginia became a state. Obviously, the quality of my videos has gone up marginally since then, just a little bit. If you like this video, definitely subscribe to the channel, because all I talk about on here is West Virginia history, and I hope you had a fantastic West Virginia day. Until next time, don't forget to stay wild, stay wonderful, and I'll talk to you later.